Imagine waking up one morning and just realizing that the political house you've lived in your entire life, it just no longer fits your moral foundation. Like the walls feel completely suffocating, the roof is caving in, and the neighborhood that you thought you knew suddenly seems hostile.
Right. Yeah.
So do you, compromise your foundation just to stay in the house, or do you tear the whole thing down and start building something completely new?
It's the ultimate test of intellectual integrity, really.
Yeah.
When that pressure mounts, most people just redecorate.
Yeah, paint the walls.
Exactly. They shift a little bit.
Yeah.
Very few people actually have the stomach to demolish the house and draft completely new blueprints.
And that kind of intellectual demolition is exactly what we are tracking today. You, our listener, sent us a really fascinating prompt for this deep dive. You basically handed us a stack of 5 essays.
A dense stack, by the way.
Very dense. Written by a single author, William Brannis, and they were published between early 2023 and early 2026. And your mission for us was highly specific. You asked us to, read through these papers and figure out if this author's core political ideology actually changed over those few years, or if we are just looking at like a massive shift in his political voice and tone.
Which is a phenomenal question. Because, if you just skim the first paper, which is called America, A Path Forward, and then you skip right to the final paper, Political, the whiplash is intense.
Oh, it's totally jarring.
Yeah, you would swear you were reading two completely different authors with, two entirely different worldviews.
So to figure out what actually happened, we are diving into those 2 papers, plus 3 others that kind of bridge the gap. Faith in the American Identity, GW Farewell, and Islamic America.
Right.
But before we really get into the weeds here, we have to state something very, very clearly. Because these sources, they dive into highly charged political, religious, and, foreign policy arguments.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about everything from really intense critiques of the U.S. military-industrial complex all the way to the establishment of Islamic arbitration boards in America.
Right. So let's put up the guardrails. We are not taking sides on any of this.
Not at all, no.
We are not endorsing, we're not criticizing any of the left-wing or right-wing views presented in these texts. Our sole goal today is to just impartially map the author's intellectual journey based strictly on the text you provided us.
Yeah, we are just here to analyze the arguments. And honestly, the trajectory of those arguments is fascinating.
Yeah.
So to understand where the author ends up in 2026, we have to start by establishing his baseline worldview.
Where he started.
Exactly, in early 2023. And looking at those early papers, the tone is undeniably apocalyptic. It is a blaring warning bell.
Right.
He repeatedly describes America as a nation in severe decline, actively losing its soul.
And he points to very specific culprits for this decline, right? He calls out the spread of liberalism, materialist propaganda, and this indoctrination into what he calls scientism over genuine spirituality.
Yeah, scientism is a big word for him there. He argues that the root cause of basically every modern social ill, whether it's, the breakdown of the family unit or rising violent crime, it all stems from a rejection of God and the loss of a unified American identity.
Okay.
And for him, that original healthy identity is perfectly encapsulated in the national motto, "In God We Trust."
And what's wild is that he goes to great lengths to prove this isn't just his personal, theological preference.
No, not at all.
He builds this incredibly dense rationalist argument for the existence of a creator. And he pulls from math and physics. He actually brings up the physicist Stephen Hawking.
Right, which you don't usually see in these kinds of political essays.
Yeah. He points out that the laws of physics and the fine-tuning of the universe actually point to a grand designer.
And the mechanism he relies on heavily here is this philosophical concept of infinite regress. He compares contingent realities in the universe to an endless string of zeros.
Okay, wait, let me make sure I'm tracking the logic there. So, a string of zeros, no matter how long it is, essentially has 0 value.
Correct.
You can have a billion zeros, but it equates to absolutely nothing until you place a 1 in front of them.
Exactly.
So he is basically arguing that the universe is just a string of zeros without an uncaused causer.
Right.
A creator at the front of the equation to give the whole system its reality and order.
You nailed it. That's exactly it. And that theological baseline, it directly informs his political baseline. Because he believes the universe has this strict, divinely ordained order, he believes society must be anchored in strict moral limits.
Which translates politically how?
Well, politically in 2023, his stance is deeply libertarian and strict conservative. He advocates for a highly limited federal government that is fiercely bound by the Constitution.
And he takes aim at some massive targets right out of the gate. He is vehemently opposed to the Federal Reserve.
Oh, intense.
Yeah, he doesn't just think that they mismanage interest rates or whatever. He views the Fed as a private entity that structurally traps the nation in endless debt.
Right. It's a systemic critique. And he pairs that domestic critique with a fiercely anti-imperialist foreign policy.
Yeah, the GW Farewell essay.
Exactly. He relies heavily on George Washington's farewell address to make this point. He critiques the U.S. military-industrial complex and the standing army, arguing that the system mechanically incentivizes perpetual war.
And he gets very specific here, pointing out the billions of dollars spent on foreign entanglements, specifically calling out funding for Ukraine and aid to Israel.
Yeah.
He views these as dangerous violations of Washington's warning against foreign influence. He argues this kind of empire building just strips the American public of their wealth through taxation, all to serve international banking conglomerates.
So his diagnosis in early 2023 is basically that the federal government is bloated, it's secular, it's imperialist, and it is completely detached from its founding moral principles.
Which leads to his proposed solution, because, he clearly has zero faith in top-down reform or like maneuvering within the political parties.
Right, the parties are totally useless to him at this point.
Yeah, so he proposes what he calls a bottom-up approach. He advocates for citizens to form semi-autonomous, faith-based communities. He actually compares them to the Amish or Jewish communities, though he insists these should be inclusive rather than isolated. But the goal is to build localized political clout to eventually revive the morality of the broader nation.
That localization is key to his whole strategy.
But wait, I have to push back on his logic here for a second, because he spends pages sounding the alarm against the erosion of a unified American system, right?
Actually, a warning bell.
But his solution to this massive national crisis is to basically isolate into semi-autonomous religious enclaves. Like, if the house is burning down, how does locking yourself in the basement save the structure?
No, it seems completely contradictory at first glance. But you have to look at how he defines the original American structure.
Okay, how does he define it?
To his mind, the Constitution wasn't designed to create this massive, homogenized federal culture. It was explicitly designed to limit federal power and protect these exact types of autonomous, localized communities.
Oh, I see.
So, by withdrawing from federal overreach and focusing intensely on local self-governance, he believes he isn't abandoning the nation at all. He thinks he is actually embodying the original intent of the Founding Fathers.
Okay, that makes the mechanism make sense. So the bedrock of his early 2023 worldview is limited government, individual liberty, and moral responsibility, all exercised at the local level.
Yes, exactly.
But an ideology built on localized withdrawal eventually collides with a broader culture that views that specific localized group as a threat.
Which brings us perfectly to the pivotal shift in late 2025, because we have to ask, how does a strict, Constitution-loving conservative react when the broader political culture, and specifically Christian nationalist rhetoric, starts aggressively painting his religion as fundamentally un-American?
That friction is what triggers the November 2025 paper, Islamic America. And you can feel the tonal shift immediately in the text.
Oh, it's a 180-degree turn in tone.
Yeah, it goes from this pessimistic warning bell to a highly defensive, almost harmonizing posture.
Right. He notes that he is responding directly to foreign-funded propaganda that's claiming Islam is completely incompatible with America. And instead of retreating further into that localized community, he goes on a massive intellectual offensive.
I found this part so fascinating. He is essentially building a translation engine.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, he isn't changing the source code of his beliefs, but he's writing a new API so a hostile American public can actually interface with his faith. I mean, in 2023, he was quoting George Washington. In late 2025, he's quoting the Quran right next to Washington.
And the way he maps American ideals directly onto Islamic law is meticulous. I mean, he takes the unalienable rights of the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and he bridges them directly to the 7 rights protected by Islamic Sharia law.
Yeah, he lists those 7 rights as faith, life, intellect, honor, lineage, wealth, and property. Now, listener, you might be hearing this and wondering, wait, how does pursuit of happiness translate to something like intellect and lineage?
It's a jump, for sure.
It is, but his argument is really clever. He says that preserving your mind, protecting your family line, and securing your property, that is the practical definition of pursuing a fulfilling life.
Right. He is arguing they're the exact same concepts, just articulated through a different cultural vocabulary.
Yeah, exactly.
He even translates structural American concepts. Like, he compares the American idea of a town hall and a representative Congress to the Islamic concept of shura, which translates to mutual consultation.
Right.
And he grounds all of this in history, pointing out that Muslims have been part of the American fabric since before the Revolutionary War. He even notes that Morocco was the very first nation to formally recognize U.S. independence.
So going back to your original prompt, listener, is this an actual shift in his political ideology?
Based on the text, no, not at all.
Right. The underlying variables just haven't changed. Limited government, individual liberty, anti-imperialism, they're all still completely intact. What has changed is his marketing.
Yeah. The API, like you said.
He is no longer just the alarmed conservative. He is actively trying to prove that his faith is not a threat to the Founding Fathers' original vision, but is actually the ultimate reinforcement of it.
But, there is a limit to how far translation can actually take you when the political environment demands strict adherence to these binary labels.
Yeah, and that tension finally snaps in early 2026.
It really does.
The paper is simply titled Political, and this is where the intellectual demolition happens. He realizes his unique blend of strict constitutionalism and Islamic morality simply does not fit into the Republican or libertarian boxes he used to associate with.
The API just didn't work.
Right, it didn't work. So he officially files for a political divorce.
The tone here is, it's highly structured, it's deeply resolved, and it's intensely personal. He announces his total detachment from all mainstream labels.
He explicitly notes he cast a no-confidence vote against the entire two-party system.
Right. He rejects the term libertarian. He rejects classic liberal. He just throws it all out.
And he invents his own bespoke ideology, calling it Islamic constitutionalism.
Yes.
Now, we need to clarify something important here because he references an academic named Asifa Qureshi-Landis in this section.
Right. We have to make this distinction.
Because Qureshi-Landis is a prominent scholar who writes about Islamic constitutionalism, but usually in the context of how Muslim-majority countries can govern themselves by, like, separating state law from religious scholarly law without becoming theocracies or secular states.
Yeah, and he is incredibly careful to distinguish his usage from hers.
Yeah.
He explicitly redefines the term for his own purposes.
Right.
He isn't talking about governing a Muslim-majority nation-state. He is taking that phrase and applying it as a localized civic philosophy for a minority community within a secular American framework.
He wants total ownership of this definition.
Exactly, and he builds a clear framework for it, laying out 7 core principles: individualism, the presumption of freedom, limited government, civic society, the rule of law, a free market economy, and peace.
What is most revealing about these principles, though, is what he actively rejects in order to maintain them.
Right.
Like, he explicitly rejects theocracy, which makes sense given his focus on individual freedom. He rejects socialism, but he also forcefully rejects corporate, predatory capitalism.
Yeah, and the mechanism he proposes for that free market principle is really interesting. He demands a system where the government vigorously protects private property, but he opposes the taxation of labor, and he entirely rejects the concept of corporate personhood.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, he argues that corporations shouldn't enjoy the legal rights of human individuals.
But the culmination of this new ideology, like its most striking practical application, is his proposal for the justice system.
Right, the arbitration boards.
Yeah, he advocates for Muslim communities to utilize existing U.S. secular law to set up third-party arbitration boards.
No, this is where it gets really dense.
It does, because, listener, you might be thinking, wait, how can an ideology that relies on Islamic arbitration coexist with a secular U.S. Constitution? Like, you can't just set up a parallel rogue justice system in America.
No, you can't.
But he isn't proposing a rogue system. He is utilizing the Federal Arbitration Act.
Precisely.
Ugh.
Under U.S. civil law, 2 parties can sign a contract agreeing to settle their disputes using a specific mediator, and the secular courts will actually enforce that binding arbitration contract.
It's brilliant.
It is. He compares this directly to Jewish Beth Din courts or Christian family arbitration centers.
That is the brilliance of his bottom-up strategy. I mean, he doesn't need to overthrow the federal government to implement Islamic arbitration for his community. He just needs 2 consenting adults to sign a civil contract under secular law. It's a localized system of justice that relies entirely on voluntary participation and completely respects federal supremacy.
And when you trace the trajectory of that idea, it is the ultimate expression of the localized autonomous communities he first proposed all the way back in early 2023.
Exactly.
He didn't abandon a single one of his core principles. He just abandoned the political parties because he felt the parties abandoned the Constitution.
Which answers the core of your prompt perfectly. You know, did his ideology change over these 3 years?
Right.
The answer, based strictly on the text, is a resounding no. His core ideology, anti-imperialism, free markets, limited government, and a strict moral foundation, it remained an absolute rock.
But his political voice, his tone, and the labels he chose to adopt underwent a massive evolution.
Massive.
I mean, he transitioned from an alarmed, traditional conservative warning about societal collapse to this unaffiliated pioneer actively charting a hyper-personalized political philosophy.
Right.
He basically stopped trying to force his beliefs into a prefabricated political house that didn't suit him, and he just built his own architecture.
It's such a fascinating intellectual journey, and honestly, it leaves us with a pretty profound question to mull over.
What's that?
Well, if mainstream political labels have become so rigid and so binary that a strict constitutionalist feels forced to invent an entirely new political framework just to maintain his religious and moral integrity, what does that actually mean for the future of the American 2-party system?
It's a huge question.
Are we entering an era where voters will increasingly realize the pre-built political houses are structurally unsound and just decide to start drawing up their own blueprints?
It certainly suggests the 2-party system might not be destroyed by an opposing force, but simply, abandoned by individuals who demand ideological consistency over party loyalty.
Something to really think about the next time you are asked to check a box on a political survey. Well, thanks for sending us this stack of essays. Keep diving deep.